Welcome everyone. This is Mentoring 37, the video podcast brought to you by the International Mentoring Community, where it's all about mentoring or mentoring for the world. My name is Stephen Hobbs. I'm the Director of Certification for the International Mentoring Community. And on board is Doug Lawrence, who is the Director of Education for the International Mentoring Community, or as we commonly say, IMC is our way of doing it. And like any show, we have a number of topics. We've got three main ones today, and I'll give you a little bit of that sort of table of contents for today's show. But one of the things that we always do on every show is to share our definition of mentoring and to tear apart, tickle out an element of the statement. And we have Doug who does that for us. So Doug, if you want to share our definition and tickle out that one part, that'll get us started. So over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. So our definition is as follows. Mentoring is about a two-way trusted arrangement in which the mentor and mentee can form a deeper and richer collaborative alliance, resulting in both learning and growing personally and professionally. So the part that we want to talk about, albeit briefly, is around the word phrase resulting in both learning and growing personally and professionally. And so for me, what typically happens in a lot of corporate mentorship programs is that, we focus on the professional aspect of learning and growing, but we don't spend a lot of time on the personal side. Thoughts?
Yeah, because that's coming from that sense of mentoring is to deal with lived experience. And that personal side, there is and we love these words, deeper, richer. There's an opportunity to go deeper, richer in understanding who you are. So I think that's a great balance, and professional about how you are with others, personal about how you are for yourself. So that's how I would add to that storyline.
And just to share, this morning I had it was the first mentoring session with a new client, and I provided her with the actual definition as I just related. And the part that caught her attention and kind of sealed the deal, so to speak, was the aspect that learning and growing on a personal and professional basis was just as much for the mentor as it was for the mentee.
Yes. And that's a great point, because if it's not happening for both of you, then I'd be scratching my head and going, hang on a minute, I think we need to go back and take a look at why we're here, right, and figure that out. So that's a great, connection to the storyline. So thanks for that. So one of the other things that we would always like to introduce you to is the fact that it's Mentoring 37. So 37 in that we do not go past 37 minutes. We look to create three main points in the show and have like 7 subpoints that go with it. That's where we're going with it. And today's show is no different. We have an action outcome statement that we're going to take a look at and dive into it. We have Doug always goes out and looks for a Quora question about mentoring and brings back his answer to that question. So Doug, we have a special addition to today's call, the third part of it. And what are we going to talk about in that one?
So in that particular case, where we're going to spend a bit of our time is on the idea of the concept, the service, entering versus termination.
So that'll be more of us getting into a bit of a dialogue. And again, if comments come to us, we'll answer the comments as we move forward. So that's the 3 parts for today. Now, the other thing that I would mention on behalf of Doug and myself is that the International Mentoring Community is about co-creating community. We co-create with the community that's getting involved with us. And that's why we invite comments. That's why we invite questions. send us questions on the website, through our emails, whatever way you'd like to make contact with us. But also, one of the things that we are really looking to encourage is collaborative conversations, which happens to be a great segue into what the topic is, the action outcome statement, which it is for today, which is manage collaborative conversations to support the mentoring arrangement. So that is core to us as just even as a community, and it's core in the mentoring arrangement. That's a great segue into today's video podcast, because it's really about managing collaborative conversations in the mentoring arrangement. The community embraces it, and it's within the mentoring arrangement itself. And we're purposeful in using the word mentoring arrangement here is because the mentor leads that, is the one who holds the space for the mentee to become present, to develop the relationship with the mentor. And therefore, the collaborative conversations leans more from the mentor until the mentee gets into a space where it's just a natural learning and growth component to the arrangement, the relationship. So I want to just take a look at the couple of the words that are there. The notion of conversations. And conversations can link into the world of discussions, dialogue, willing to tell and share. So it's an active voice, ear kind of connection that's taking place. That's what the conversation's about. So it's about exchanging ideas. It's about thoughtfulness. There's a consciousness that is being touched on both parties who are involved in this. And it does affect the mindset. The conversations affects the mindset. And again, as we've alluded to, for both people, the mentor and the mentee. The other thing is that with conversations, it links to a word like convert, which is to shift the appreciation and agreement or getting acceptance of what's going on. So the conversation is to convert some ideas, some thinking, some meaningfulness. That's why we're having these conversations. Or else you'd be wondering, well, we could just talk about the weather, so is that really a mentoring conversation? Could be, if your mentoring is the topic that's of importance to you, but really it's the mentee is bringing their questions to that arrangement and having the conversation to convert that meaningfulness, that thoughtfulness that goes with it. Now, the other thing that's important here, to convert the arrangement so that you are keeping company with one another. This is a little bit more of an obscure way of looking at conversations to convert, to hold community together, even if it's just the two of you who are there. That's what the conversation is for. And it's very much this sharedness that's taking place. Okay, so that's the conversations and conversions and convert. Now, the element of collaboration is another one, because collaboration is really a way of looking at how do I maintain my assertiveness and how do I cooperate in that conversation. So collaborative conversations, my assertiveness, my cooperation in the sharing that is taking place, or maybe some telling that's going on at the same time. So it's really about looking at collaboration is one into the many and many into the one. So I, as the mentee, am collaborating with Doug, the mentor, and Doug is collaborating with me. So while we're dealing with each individually, it's also how we're dealing with it together. And that's an important piece. And we sometimes have to look at that as the collaboration is leading to something that you create that you couldn't do individually. If my ideas are being shared and your ideas are being shared, and we bring those ideas together, that's going to create something that if I didn't share my ideas with someone, I may not have seen this new way, this new thingness that's now possible in my life. So that's kind of a neat way of looking at collaboration and conversations. But one of the things, if I was to share a story at this point in time, and then I'll ask Doug for his thoughts here. One of the things that I learned over and over again in my facilitated mentoring sessions was that there was a test that was always there for me. And I always remember when I saw the face of the person sort of would go up and go, you get that deer in the headlight look, or a bit of a roll of the eye, a touch of the head. It meant that the conversation wasn't collaborative now. It sort of got lost. So the test for me is how much do I stay within patience, flexibility, and discretion? That's my test of a collaborative conversation. Am I patient still and therefore present in what's going on? Am I still being flexible and listening, and it's going in two ways, right? And is it coming from a place of discretion? It's not like I'm telling stories now that I really shouldn't be telling, or using gossip or something like that. Collaborative conversation is truly this sharing of this assertiveness and cooperation about something to bring it into thingness. That's what a collaborative conversation is about. Thoughts from your side, Doug?
It's interesting because the whole idea of that collaborative conversation, that was what I got to experience this morning when I was meeting with this new client. But here are a couple things for me that helped us develop, or basically to, I guess, develop that collaborative conversation. Was number one was being able to create a safe environment or a safe place for that conversation to actually start to take shape. And then the next thing was that also then started us down the path towards building trust. For me, one of the things that's really important is being able to create that safe place for that collaborative conversation to take place. The other aspect is around the aspect of building trust. And I think a large part of a collaborative conversation, it's a natural feeder into building the trust that you need to have a successful mentoring arrangement. And so when we look at collaborative conversations to support the mentoring arrangement, there are some variables, like I mentioned, the safe place and trust, that feed into that as well. And what I got to experience this morning was the sharing. Once we had a somewhat quasi-safe place agreed to, so to speak, and trust starting to build, the openness and willingness for information to be shared back and forth between each of us just it continued to grow and grow as the session went on.
Yeah, and I think it's picking up on that growth part, because you can learn what you're learning. We know that's in the definition, but it's the growth part, because there's that awareness, that reflection that takes place about the conversation, the bringing in the thingness, right, that's going on. And when I believe, the times that I've done things, when that mentee gets to that kind of point where all of a sudden you can almost see it again, as the ones where they drift off I was talking about, but the ones where you're, oh yeah, like, yeah, it's almost like the enthusiasm pops up, and you can see how that collaborative conversation has now lent itself to raising the growth of the mentee. Well, I think that's a pretty good swath look at this notion of collaborative conversations and a mentoring arrangement. So why don't we push on into the world of the Quora question? And you went out and you found a Quora question and you wanted to provide an answer to it. So what's the question that you went and found this time?
So the question that I have is, as a mentor, how do you get through to those facing different challenges than you've had? So my response to that was, and I'll read it verbatim so that we don't lose the essence of my response back to the person that asked the question. But so my response is, an extraordinary mentor is good at asking questions and knowing the right questions to ask in order to stimulate the critical thinking skills of their mentee. They are also good at storytelling or story sharing using relevant lived experiences that are translated into a story format, guiding, not telling. I've had mentoring sessions that I did not have industry experience in that particular industry on a professional level, or something that the person is dealing with on a personal basis. I have found in each and every one that asking questions and telling stories has helped us navigate through the challenges with positive outcomes. Proper mentor training will help alleviate questions that you may have on how to pull all of this together. And so that was the response that I provided back. And it comes back to one of the mentoring myths that we have that's out there is that you need to have industry experience in order to be able to mentor somebody in that particular field. And to me, that's a nice to have, not a need to have.
Yeah, so it's the challenges that you've had. Well, great. You want to have different kinds of challenges because that's what brings the story together, right? So you create something that's more than. I can appreciate, that there are times where you need a mentor. So maybe you've got your second mentor, okay? The second mentor is there to be able to answer the specific pieces, but you may want to have a mentor who has the differences. And now what can happen is there's three of you involved with this, maybe two different conversations, but all of a sudden the mentee's got a whole nother way of looking at what's going on. I think another myth sometimes is, well, you have one mentor at a time. Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be that way, right? So it's great. I like this one because I think the person was really attempting to get down underneath the underlying aspect of the mentoring arrangement. Mm-hmm. They may not have known it at that point in time, but it's just such a great question to get underneath that. And so I appreciate this one. So that's great. Anything else more you want to add to that before you push on? Okay. So the next thing that we wanted to do is just let you know that from an education point of view, the programs, the courses are available. There will be links at the end of the video. But at any time, you can always go to wealthmovement.com, WELLTH movement.com/mentor schools. And that's mentor-schools. That is the introductory page. And there will be a button on there if you want to go and get some more information about mentors, mentoring, and to be able to explore what's available for you and where the courses are held and those kind of things. The other part is certification is open for people who actually want to jump straight into being certified as a mentor. We welcome that. We've actually have taken a bold step. And Doug and I thought long and hard about this, and we said, you know what? We are actually going to move the IMC into the world of ISO, into International Standards Organization, and we're going to go for standards like 9001, if you know what that means. That's quality management. We're also going to follow the regulations that are listed for competence. So we're actually going to hold ourselves to a very tight yet flexible way of organizing IMC so that it can be recognized truly internationally. And that's a bold step. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, as everyone can appreciate. It'll probably take us a good year by the time it's all put together. But we've stepped into it. We've logged into the software, and we're getting ready to go. So it's a wonderful addition to our story. Okay, Doug, I think it's probably time to move into the third section of today's show. And the topic is mentoring and termination. And you've presented on this into a couple of workplaces. I know you made a visit to the university, so you might be able to share a little bit more about that. But I think that this topic is timely. And to be able to unpack it a little bit, I know I'll have some questions for you because of the conversation and the work that you've been doing. But I think it would be great if you took a couple of minutes and just sort of set up this story about what are we talking about here from mentoring versus termination.
So where the idea comes from now, I have been brought into organizations on a number of occasions where they've had an employee that they are considering terminating for a number of different reasons. They've tried coaching, they've tried a number of different approaches, mechanisms to be able to facilitate a behavioral change, and it hasn't taken place. And so they've turned to me to come in and see what I can do with using the mentoring process to be able to facilitate that behavioral change. So that's one aspect, and you are correct in that I actually just this week did a presentation to a class of MBA students that were ironically taking a course on leadership and mentoring. And so part of the conversation we had was around the idea of mentoring versus termination. So I had that all kind of packaged in there for them to be able to say, that mentoring is a powerful tool. When done effectively, it can result in a behavioral change, and that obviously has organizational benefits as well as benefits to the employee. So there was a lot of interest, because here are, obviously some of our future leaders, and one of their concerns is, as a leader in an organization wanting to create a very positive workplace culture, is the aspect of employee turnover. And the idea behind it is every time we have to, so we go through the process of looking at, okay, we're going to terminate employee A, what's that going to do to the organization? Termination will result in lost productivity, but what it also will end up creating is an added cost, because I think the research says that the cost to replace an employee is about 1.5 to 2.02 times the annual salary. And so that's a huge significant cost that doesn't actually have to be absorbed when you go with this mentoring versus termination service.
Yeah, so the aspect here is not only for the person themselves, but also for the manager leaders who is assisting that person, that manager leader with you, the HR or the group, that organization development, whatever the group is, that's bringing you in, working with the manager leader, all working with that person who, in this case, you're saying would be behavior change. So there are costs there, but they're not as high as if you are successful than terminating the person. I think that's another way of looking at it, because sometimes we just think about the person and their own salary, but there's actually a lot of cost. But more important, it goes back to one of the action outcome statements around the collaborative conversations. What it actually is doing is setting up a really solid base for collaborative conversations between the manager leader, the person that is in the mentoring relationship, mentoring arrangement with you, and the manager leader and the HR department. So an actual fact, there may have the appearance of some cost. However, the return on this kind of way of doing things is probably even more for the organization, because they're going to strengthen their platform of what I call peopleship, right? Or people navigation. So that's another neat way to add to this, the storyline that you're bringing up, and I thank you for that. So that's great. You also touched on this topic of coaching and mentoring, and sometimes coaching isn't going to work in this case where mentoring will. And coaching and mentoring and facilitating is what we're going to be talking about on our next video podcast. But let's just touch base with here, because I think you're onto something around coaching isn't always the way in which to get things done, and mentoring is. So can you just expand on that just a little bit more?
Let's talk about coaching first. And like you said, we're going to dive into it, a deeper look at coaching, mentoring, and facilitating. But when I look at coaching, and I've seen what they've done where somebody has been kind of on the ropes to be terminated, and they've come in with, here are some objectives, some goals that you need to do, and you need to do by this date, and it's very much performance related, very much performance driven. I come in on the other hand, and I build a relationship, and I spend a lot of time delving into the personal side and getting a better understanding, because in a lot of cases, a person's upbringing may be part of the reason, part of the root cause for the behavior being what it is today. And there's been something that has ignited or sparked that change in behavior where they now become more combative in the workplace. They now become disrespectful. And when I think of disrespectful, I think of one of the clients that I worked with. They weren't as willing to meet the employee halfway. They weren't willing to spend the time to get to know them, because they were the old school leader of, just here's a list of the tasks, just get them done and report back to me, versus, geez, how did Johnny's hockey game last night? Did Johnny score any goals? Oh, he got a couple. That's great. Great. I hope you have a great day. And you build that relationship where they weren't willing to do that. So then what we ended up doing in order to get this employee off the radar screen was I gave him some tools on how to think like his manager thinks. So, we typically talk about, as a leader, you need to develop your leadership style to meet the needs of every employee, because everyone is unique. I've reversed that, because at the end of the day, that's going to be the least path of resistance for you. And we've done that, and it's worked very successful. In fact, it was to the point where the management people that brought me in were saying, I don't know what you did, but whatever it was, it worked.
So again, it's the development of everyone that's concerned here is there's a benefit that comes from that. The mentoring story is important here from a lived experience, because you also have lived, about 25 years within an organization in a management role, and probably have seen just about everything that there is and having to dealt with it. So when people bring their examples in your mentoring arrangement and relationship, they are actually tapping into that lived experience, right? And that a valuable element to, again, reiterate, we're not just talking fluffy wuffy stuff here. We're actually talking, people can actually get insights from you that make sense. What would be the biggest piece of wisdom you would want to share if you are now talking to the HR department about this mentoring and termination storyline?
So I guess the big thing for me, if I'm sitting down and talking to an HR director or manager, is, are you okay with absorbing the cost of turnover by letting this employee go? And I think that the thing we all need to be cognizant of is that we need to, number one, take a look at what is the root cause. Like, why are you bringing me in to do this? Because for me, I won't engage if I don't think I can bring value. So I need to kind of understand the scenario and all of that. But for me, I guess the biggest thing that jumps out for me is, I think it's about 15 or 16%. So when you look at, Canada is ranked 4th in employee turnover globally. And so that would be something that I would be obviously bringing up, to the HR director, is that this isn't just a small problem. This is a big problem. And here are some things we can do to address that. And And so far, I guess for me, the big thing will be the success that we've had so far along the way has been very positive. Is that every time we've gone in and utilized effective mentoring techniques, we've been able to initiate a behavioral change.
So again, I think most people would understand, if you're a manager or leader, you probably get this, is you don't want, that knowledge walking out the door. Oh, there goes the employee, and we didn't really do our best by that person. So from the HR department, again, just words of wisdom from Doug and what he's been doing. So that's great. So I think we're getting to a point of closing up today's video podcast. And I'd just like to let you know is that we're certainly launching the IMC. We're getting it going. People are signing up. People are getting involved. And we certainly invite you, the listener, to get involved with us, so that we can get you ready, able, and willing to serve as a mentor. So ready, able, and willing spells raw. So we can give you the raw ingredients to cook up that dish called mentoring, and to serve it to others. And we certainly welcome you in. Again, just to remind you that April the 2nd at 10 a.m. Mountain is when we do the next Mentoring 37. And we're going to start looking at moving towards the live version of Mentoring 37 rather than this taped way of doing things. So that's going to be exciting, because we'll be probably creating some gag reels off of what we do. And so that'll be fun. The other thing I would just mention, and we shared it earlier, is that we're going to be taking a look at the action outcomes of demonstrate coaching in the mentoring arrangement and demonstrate facilitating in the mentoring arrangement, and bringing the story together. But like all shows, one of the things that I always say to Doug, it's your time to take us out. So what would you like to share with us, Doug?
We're going to use our favorite saying, is that make every minute a mentoring minute.